So just along the sidelines of the 57th session of the Economic Commission for Africa for Ministers of Finance and Economic Planning, we had a youth symposium in AfCFTA. What would your take be, Mr. Ahmed?
Right. So there's this conversation around skills and what kind of skills is required to get CFTA working. What kind of policies do we require to get it working? My first impression is whether young people themselves know what kind of skills would really be critical in operationalizing CFTA. And the second point that I would want to touch on is how is it that governments work with the young people? For instance, in getting the protocol for women and children, the amount or level of engagement should be such a way that it reflects the aspirations of young people.
That's very insightful. I mean, the opportunities and just how it can be operationalized. Mutesi, you've been part of this process. What would your take be with ASFTA and the youth process?
Well, we have a lot of issues when it comes to free movement of goods and services. I think if the countries would reduce on the visa fees and also more scrap them off because they make the movement of goods and services very difficult. Also, when it comes to import-export substitutions, I think the countries should encourage more their countries to engage in industrialization so that to reduce on the things that we import and then we export more than we import because if we can import even toothpicks, so I think it's going to make the policy very hard to be achieved.
But Ray, maybe picking up from where Mutesi landed, the question then is, countries have made a lot of effort in terms of putting in place vocational training, but the young people ourselves, are we committed to going through vocational training and acquiring the skills? So you find young people are applying to manufacturing companies for jobs, but they are not willing to acquire the skills that these companies want. They want to do history, political science, English language. And so young people ourselves must begin to conscientize and then, undertake skills that are practical to translate our natural resources into finished products, create the jobs and the quality of life.
That's wonderful.
There's also those ones who have skills, but they do not have capital to start up their own, to apply these skills. There's lack of capital, lack of income. It's hard to access credit because you need something to put in the bank, like a title or something to give you capital. So I think also governments should be looking through how to make easy access for capital and credit for young people to start up, to apply these skills.
One thing that had really stood out for me was the conversation around creative economies, because we have a lot of young people interested in technology, especially things like gaming. We did see some of the entrepreneurs start into gaming, and the disclosure that ASFTA really takes into context even creative economies, which would be huge. I think that was an eye-opener for me. And I think moving forward, there's a great opportunity and potential for, creating jobs, because I had one of the colleagues from Uganda. He has a creative, like a game creating studio, and then he employs people, they create free assets, and then young people from the comfort of their homes, they can create assets and then be able to sell from that marketplace. I think that was very much an interesting, and we've looked into the challenges and probably opportunities. And what do you think could be some of the low-hanging fruits that young people could look at immediately following the conversations?
Look, from where I stand, it's also about us, in addition to the university degrees, acquiring basic skills that allows us to delve into the entrepreneurial space. And then the solidarity of advocacy, approaching our governments, holding them accountable for the protocols that they've signed to. All of them have signed to CFTA. How is it that young people themselves are able to hold these governments accountable in the operationalization and implementation of these processes? These are very low-hanging fruits that we can take on.
What do you think in terms of the low-hanging fruits, in terms of immediate opportunities that we could look at?
Well, I think we can only encourage our governments to be intentional when it comes to promoting that policy, because we can end up having meetings and talking about it, but if governments are not coming on board and saying, okay, if we are promoting this, let's put this in place, remove taxes on goods that are like they shouldn't be taxed every border spot, to encourage people to buy these goods, because it makes them very expensive. So that people they end up preferring things that come from China, from Europe, because African goods, the movements is hard and then it becomes very expensive. So government should look at that maybe.
Wonderful. That was great. Thank you so much.